everyone, I'm Nitzahone, and it is Tuesday, not Friday, the normal day when I post MTG top 10s, but this week I'm doing an extra one, and for good reason. Wizards gave me the honor of being the first to show you one of the cards in Masters 25, and this top 10 was inspired by that card. Masters 25 is a supplemental set that celebrates Magic's 25th anniversary, which comes this year, and it will be released on March 16th. Like other Masters sets, it is filled with reprints from Magic's history and is intended to be drafted. Masters 25 is special in that it includes at least one reprint from every one of Magic's sets so far, so it is a set filled with nostalgia. So without further ado, let's get to the spoiler card. That card is Gideon, King of Keldor, originally printed in Cold Snap, as you can see from the awesome watermark that all the cards in Masters 25 carry. Gideon was an important figure during the Ice Age on Dominaria, and he and the armies he rose and led managed to defeat Lim-Dul, one of the major villains in the storyline. The flavor of Gidion's skilled leadership and his massive army are well conveyed in what the card does. If you take damage, you get to make white soldier tokens for every damage you take, so he can quite quickly assemble an army. Gideon himself is a soldier and is already a pretty popular EDH general for soldier decks, so they'll be happy about this reprint. The fact that Gideon is a soldier engine made me want to look back in Magic's history and discuss the 10 soldiers who have made the biggest impact on Magic's competitive scene. Soldier is a creature type that appears on basically every plane, since soldiers are necessary on most worlds, and they occur across all colors, although white soldiers, like Gideon, are the most common. There have been over 600 cards printed that either make soldier creature tokens or have the soldier creature type. Before we get into the list of the 10 best, a quick reminder on how I score them. Pro Tour top 8s, along with Vintage and Legacy Championship top 8s, are worth 2 points, and Grand Prix top 8s are worth 1 point. Now, let's move to number 10. At number 10, we have another legendary king with the soldier creature type who also likes to make soldier tokens, Brimaz, King of Oreskos. He really takes advantage of having vigilance since he gets to make a cat token when he either attacks or blocks, and that really creates a problem for your opponent. The guy is obviously incredible and was a very pushed mythic rare. In Theros Block Constructed, he picked up 2 Pro Tour top 8s, and in Standard he showed up in both control and aggro decks, not something that a 3-drop creature is always capable of. But the sheer power level of Brimaz, along with the fact that he brought so much value by giving you all these cat tokens, made him a good card in control decks too. In Standard, he appeared in Orzhov control and Blue-White control, but by the end of 2014, he transitioned into exclusively being in aggressive or mid-range decks, including Abzan, alongside fellow cats like Rakshasa Death Dealer and Fleecemane Lion. Brimaz has also managed a couple of modern Grand Prix top 8s, both in Hate Bear decks, one in 2015 and one in 2017, and in 2016 he found his way into a Legacy deck, a Death and Taxes deck, which is basically the Legacy version of Hate Bear, but he's only managed one Grand Prix in that format. At number 9, we have a soldier who has incredibly efficient stats, Loxodon Smiter. A 3-mana 4/4 offers excellent stats, but he also does a good job of combating 2 different strategies between not being able to be countered and being put onto the battlefield for free if he's discarded from your hand. In Block and Standard, he was a key part of 2 different aggro decks, Selesnya and Naya, where he was one of the best things a deck could do on turn 3. In Modern, he also sees play, primarily as a way of combating Liliana of the Veil, and he sees play there in Zoo, Abzan, and Hate Bear decks. At number 8, we have a soldier who is also a lord, Scion of Una. The Scion pumps all your fairies and gives them the powerful keyword ability, Shroud. Luckily for the Scion, Fairies was a tier 1 deck across multiple formats. This was because it was an aggro deck with lots of instant speed creatures like the Scion that allowed it to play a bit of a control game while also being an aggro deck. The Scion, for example, could be flashed in to essentially counter a removal spell that was pointed at one of your fairies, while also happening to pump your entire team. Fairies were good in Block, Standard, Extended, and Modern, and Scion of Una went along for the ride in all of those formats. At number 7, we have a soldier who really hates burn decks, and that is Core Firewalker. Not only does it have protection from red, it also gains you life every time a player casts a red spell. That's a nightmare for opponents trying to win the game with Lava Spikes. On top of that, it has pretty reasonable stats for 2 mana as a 2/2. Red frequently has very efficient spells for killing small creatures, so being immune to those makes the Firewalker even nicer. It even saw some play in decks running red, since the life gain from it triggers any time any player plays a red spell. In Standard, it managed top 8s in Boros Landfall and Cobblade. It also sees play in Modern sideboards today, since it's so good at giving Burn a hard time, and Burn is of course a tier 1 deck there. At number 6, we have the only soldier to make this list who is an artifact creature, and that is Etched Champion. In an artifact-heavy deck, Etched Champion is incredibly difficult to deal with, since it will frequently have protection from all colors, and that's especially scary when you put something like a cranial plating on it. It essentially becomes unblockable and unkillable in those situations, and can quickly end the game. Etched Champion didn't actually manage any huge success while in Standard, but has found a lot of success in Modern, where it shows up in most Affinity builds, and Affinity has been a Tier 1 deck since Modern was born back in 2011, allowing it to amass a pretty impressive resume in just one deck. At number 5, we have a Planeswalker that produces soldier creature tokens, Elspeth, Knight Errant. She can protect herself while increasing her loyalty thanks to her soldiers. If you have plenty of protection, she can also increase her loyalty by sending your creatures to the sky much larger, and she has what usually amounted to a game-ending ultimate in that she made all of your permanents indestructible. In Standard, she appeared in a variety of decks, Kithkins and Black-White tokens probably being the most consistent to run her, but also appearing in various Bant mid-range decks. Her most dominant showing in Standard was at Pro Tour Kyoto in 2009, where she appeared in 4 of the top 8 decks. She wasn't relegated to Standard either. She also managed 3 Pro Tour top 8s and 2 Grand Prix top 8s in Extended for the few years that the format still existed after she was printed, appearing in Dora and the Siege Tower decks and White Weenie, among other decks. Once Extended ended and Modern was created, she continued to see play, showing up in Zoo decks, Blue-White Control, and just multicolor good stuff decks. She has even proven powerful enough to see play in Legacy, primarily in Miracles and Maverick. However, she hasn't managed the top 8 in any format since 2015, and she hasn't been a part of any major decks in either Modern or Legacy for a while now, but there's always the chance that she gets another shot. At number 4, we have another soldier who was a leader like Darien and Brimaz, Anna Fenza the Foremost, the leader of the Abzan on the plane of Tarkir. 3 mana for a 4/4 is already a great rate, but on top of that, when she attacks, she puts a +1/+1 counter on another one of your creatures who is tapped, which generally means one of your attackers. What's more, she has a Leyline of the Void stapled to her for good measure, which makes it so that if any of your opponent's cards would go in the graveyard, they get exiled instead. Anna Fenza benefited from a couple of different things while she was in Standard. One, that she was in the Abzan colors. This was obviously great, as she was part of an extremely powerful set of cards, including Siege Rhino, an Abzan charm that all came together to make one of the best decks in the early part of the time that she was in Standard. Then, once Collected Company was printed, she benefited from the fact that she cost 3 mana or less, meaning she could be hit off of Collected Company, and that's the 2 places she saw play in Standard, Collected Company and Abzan decks. She has shown up a little bit in modern versions of Collected Company decks too, having managed 2 top 8s in those. At number 3, we have a soldier whose design was a result of the Magic Invitational, Ranger of Eos. The Ranger basically amounts to a 4-mana 3/2 who draws you 2 cards, and that's pretty good, provided you have built your deck correctly around him with plenty of 1-drops. The Ranger was designed by Antoine Ruel, a professional Magic player who won the 2006 Magic Invitational Tournament, a now defunct annual tournament where the year's best players were invited to compete in a tournament, and the winner got to design a card, and not only that, the card bore the likeness of the winner. Most of the Invitational cards went on to be pretty successful on the competitive scene. Turns out pro players know how to design powerful cards, and Ranger of Eos is no exception. The Ranger was a nice top curve for aggressive decks, as it gave them a way of making sure they continued to draw creatures to populate the board with. In Standard, this included Kithkin and Zoo decks, and in Extended, this included White Weenie and Elves. After Extended ended in 2011 and Modern was created, Ranger of Eos continued to see play. It was a good card in Birthing Pod decks because it gave you value before you sacrificed it to the pod, while also giving you more of a tutor effect, which the Birthing Pod gives you as well. After Birthing Pod got banned in 2014, Ranger of Eos disappeared from Modern for a while, until 2016, when a certain 1-mana creature became one of the most feared creatures in all of Modern, Death's Shadow. The fact that the Ranger could load your hand with 2 of these was a real problem for your opponent because you had 2 huge creatures you could play, and it continues to see play in the various version of Death's Shadow in Modern, and it will continue to, as long as that deck is relevant. At number 2, we have another Planeswalker who makes soldier tokens. In fact, it is another version of Elspeth, this time Elspeth, Sun's Champion. She has what has to be one of the most ridiculous loyalty-increasing abilities we have ever seen, the ability to create 3 soldier tokens. This provided excellent protection for her, and that meant she could continue to tick her loyalty up more and more, and it didn't hurt that she could sweep away all the large creatures around when she needed to, or that she had an emblem, which wasn't that uncommon to get to, thanks to all the soldier tokens you had, that made all your creatures, including your army of soldier tokens, much bigger and gave them flying. She was a very powerful and commonly played card in control and mid-range decks of the Standard format of her day, getting top 8s in Esper, Orzhov, and Blue-White control decks. Jeskai Tokens decks, Abzan decks, and so on. Near the end of her time in Standard at Grand Prix London in 2015, she managed to sweep the entire event, with at least one copy of Elspeth being in all top 8 decks in the event. Recently, she has even started making some appearances in Modern, appearing as a win condition in both blue-white and Jeskai control decks. At number 1, we have another Planeswalker, but this one doesn't make soldier creature tokens. He turns himself into a soldier, and that's Gideon, ally of Zendikar. Every version of Gideon turns himself into a soldier, but this version of Gideon is the best we've ever seen. He was so dominant in Standard that he has managed to come in near the top of other MTG top 10s as well. And actually, he would be number 1 on Planeswalkers if I remade the list today, and he was number 1 on the list on Indestructible. While in Standard, he never missed a single Pro Tour top 8. And I haven't looked at it super closely, but I'm 99% sure that he didn't miss a single Grand Prix top 8 either while he was in Standard. He is an incredibly good Planeswalker. He can put 2/2 tokens into play to protect himself, allowing him to produce even more tokens, or he can turn into a 5/5 indestructible soldier who's pretty good at brawling. And his ultimate gives you an emblem that gives you an Anthem effect, and he can actually use that effect right away. If a deck had white in it while he was in Standard, you can bet he found his way into it. If not in the main board, then in the sideboard. You don't need me to tell you how ubiquitous he was. He was such a mainstay in Standard that there were multiple rumors that he will be banned, and while we have had 3 waves of Standard bannings, the likes of which we hadn't ever seen, or at least not in a very long time, Gideon was left untouched, and he continued to dominate the format. You don't need me to read off every single kind of deck he's been in. Let's just leave it at all of them that had white in them in Standard when he was legal. He's even started showing up in Modern more recently too, picking up top 8s in Collected Company, Abzan, Jeskai Control, and Junk decks, and his power level is high enough for him to continue to see play there. That does it for this week's MTG Top 10. I hope you enjoyed the preview card and the top 10 listed inspired. If you did, don't forget to hit the like button and share it so others can enjoy it too. If you want to catch more MTG Top 10s, including another one this Friday, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.